Now, the other key thing about social media is not only is it an environment where you can use it to promote yourselves and provide value and basically sort of point and create added visibility. One of the things you have to be aware of is it's also an environment that can become an early warning system if you monitor it correctly. In fact, this morning is a perfect example of that. Ticketmaster on Twitter are being slated to within an inch of their life because their website selling take-back tickets is repeatedly crashing. So a lot of people are posting an awful lot of angry comments on Twitter, for example, because Ticketmaster has in effect failed to live up to its expectations. They can't buy their tickets. Now, social media can act as that sort of environment if you engage in that environment and pick up on those issues that people have. And often a problem solved and problem solved well actually reflects very well on an organization, certainly better than a problem that's just ignored. So if you're seeing people having issues about the products or services that you supply, or products that maybe you don't sell but other people in your channel or business space do, and you can become a voice of reason and a voice of, well, actually, did you realize if you did this, your problem would be solved, it's improving the visibility and the social media environment that you operate within. And you're becoming a trusted advisor. As in many cases, we as DMC hope to become a trusted advisor to you as an organization going forwards. The other thing about social media is it tends to be a lot more honest, which is not necessarily something that marketeers like to hear about. I think many people obviously want to look and see, well, actually everybody says we're great. Traditionally, when you've done surveys, when you ring up clients and say, you know, how well do you think we did, a lot of people tend to be a little bit shy about making obviously negative comments, unless obviously you've done something really bad. However, in a social media environment, people are a lot more a lot happier to infer that maybe the service wasn't quite as good as they expected, maybe they didn't get the level of service that they wanted, and to point out problems. So hotels is a perfect example of it. You know, on the reception, how was your stay? Yes, it was fine. You pay the bill, you walk out. Actually, what's not said is you thought the room was damp and that the walls could do with repainting and the bathroom wasn't up to date and the food service took too long. And actually for the hotel, that's very valuable information, but it's not going to be presented to them in a face-to-face environment. So quite often social media is a very good way of understanding actually what the customers think. The other key thing to bear in mind is your responses. Information on the superhighway doesn't die. You can see an email that's on the page at the moment, which is actually from a company called PhotoGuard, who in effect, unfortunately, slagged off one of their clients who had a complaint and put it into the public domain that they, for example, didn't think the client was particularly clever. I think is probably a shortened way of looking at it. That information from 2004 is still available on the internet, and as you can imagine, doesn't particularly reflect very well on PhotoGuard. It's an American organization, a bit like Jessup's. They're an online online photograph printing organization. So you have to be careful how it's been addressed. As my mother said, don't do anything that you'd be ashamed of anybody else seeing or reading in the future. So, moving on, and I guess this is kind of completing some of the conversation, or completing some of the things I've already talked about. Traditionally, you used to speak directly to your clients, and they in effect would sort of have, you know, from a sales perspective, believe what you passed on to them. If you said your product did X, Y, and Z, then they would kind of take it as read. Nowadays, that client and that relationship you have with that prospect has changed. They can find out an awful lot more about your products and services directly from the internet, so they can find out whether your product can actually work and how it works. So it has to be something that if you can get into those spaces, you can help manage that process. So the environments that you can manage that process from within the internet environment, and the profiles that you can start to create. Again, this comes back to what I said earlier on about where you need to be, and I'll summarize this in the top tips towards the end of this seminar. As I said earlier on, be where your customers are. Sage as an organization are across many different environments, things like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Plaxo, which is a European version, I guess, of Facebook, if that's the right word for it. It's something that's a lot more prevalent in Europe than it is in the UK. MySpace, YouTube, these environments are where Sage customers go to. YouTube is a particularly good example in that it can be used for posting a lot of how-to information and providing value. So, for example, this webcast will appear within DMC's YouTube channel going forwards. And it means that people can then browse information and understand actually whether you provide the additional value that they're looking for. DMC also provide a lot of blogs. Because of the nature of our business, we tend to get into sort of slightly more detailed conversations with our clients because of the technical nature of it, and so things like accountancy, for example. The blogs are a very good way of providing free of charge information, advice on, say, for example, the change in VAT that's about to come into place, and lots of other key aspects where something like Facebook doesn't lend itself to a fairly wordy conversation. But again, this comes back down to being in the environment that you feel are relevant to yourselves. One of the other things that Sage does is actually have a community for ACT, for example, and this provides things like discussion boards where Sage can post additional information about products, what's coming next, but also use it as an environment to take feedback and have discussions with the end users. So hopefully now you've got an understanding of what social media is all about and how potentially we are using it. And I guess many of you will be using it yourselves in your day-to-day business lives if you're not actually using it in your consumer life, shall we say, if you're not actually using it in your business lives at the moment. So how do we start to make sense of that and start to use it? And this is kind of the first and only bit of shameless sales pitch that we have from a Sage perspective. In a business environment, Sage obviously now provide CRM and ERP applications. And the key thing as we go forward and start to go through the rest of the workshop is that information that you start to gather in a social media environment needs somewhere to live so that you can make use of it going forward. So we have a principle of what's called context-aware services. These are things that are starting to come into play, particularly with regards to CRM environments. And it's enabling us to collect information from different places, so from things like LinkedIn, things like ZoomInfo or Yell.com, things like that, and being able to pull that information into our CRM applications and present that information back to an end user. So not only alongside the name and address information that you got from Dun & Bradstreet or within your or Yell or ZoomInfo, for example, about an organization, you can also see alongside a contact their LinkedIn profile, their Facebook profile if relevant, their Twitter stream, and start to use that information as being part of the information you gather and hold about an individual. It also means that when you start to target individuals from a sales perspective or a marketing perspective, you've got a lot more insight into that individual. Organizations traditionally over the last few years, last 10 years or so, when you started using things like email marketing, the trick to get email marketing to work, or one of the main considerations, is relevance. If I can send you an email saying, "Dear Robert Pope at DMC, we understand you bought some of our products and we think you'd like this one," you're going to get a lot more success out of an email like that than you're going to get out of a, "Dear Punter, we're trying to sell some products, would you like to buy one?" And that next step of social media enables us to pick up and say, well, we can see that you've got a LinkedIn profile that says you've got an interest in a certain vertical, you've got specializations, or your Twitter stream says that you're looking for take that tickets, and guess what, we've got some. So all of this information being consolidated back to your CRM and ERP application gives you a better picture of your clients. It also enables you to start to use your information that you hold within your organization to generate information in the social media environment. So one of the things that, just to give you an idea now of how to get started, and that's the end of the shameless small selling pitch, if that makes sense, is to start to give you an indication as to how you should actually start operating within those environments. So what I thought I'd do now very quickly is just give you an insight into the sort of environments that DMC have operated within and the success that we and Sage have had, and maybe you can learn from some of these examples. So as I said earlier on, key thing really is to understand where your clients operate. So what we did in this environment, we've taken about 6 months worth of data from different accounts that we and Sage have used, and the idea is to start to give back some elements of results and the things that we have found successful. And as I said, it's find where your people tend to run around. Where do your customers spend their time? Where do they go looking for your kind of products? Is it on Facebook? Is it on LinkedIn? And as we go forward with regards to recommendations of things to do first, one of the key things that we notice is we get a lot more traffic and a lot more nodes around what we would classify as topic-centric. So if, for example, and this seminar, a webcast is a good example of it, if we had trailered this as being, come and buy a CRM system, we would likely to have very poor results with regards to the people who would be interested. However, telling people about social media and how to operate gets a lot more noise and a lot more success, and therefore ultimately creates a situation improving, hopefully improving, assuming we do a good job, improving DMC's brand reputation and moving us into what we would classify as trusted advisor status. So things about a topic, people will not particularly listen to, buy our product, it's great. People are much more likely to have an interest in, you've got a problem like this is how we fixed it, and this is information we can provide that will help you. Or we have a piece of content that's worth listening to or reading, so we put it on a blog, and therefore you can generate more interest. Now, the other big thing to bear in mind, and this is something that a lot of people have a problem with when they first start and get into social media, is that traditionally it seems as very small numbers. But one thing to bear in mind is that social media has a snowball effect. One, it lasts forever, and secondly, when you first start, you may only have a couple of followers on Twitter, for example, or a couple of followers or a couple of people you are on a LinkedIn profile. But what you need to bear in mind is that you're in effect potentially leveraging your followers. So when we first start the information that we've presented, and it's a good representation of work that we at DMC have done, people are still picking up on information that we provided over 18 months ago about other products. So we have run workshops on products like Microsoft SharePoint, for example, or how to improve the use of Microsoft Excel. That information never dies. So it may take time for people to find it and then start to use it, but actually it continues to grow and grow in a snowball effect. Not only that, when people post, it's then potentially viewable by their followers, and that snowball effect starts to sort of expand out. So when you first start out, just have that as an understanding. Don't be disappointed if you only have a very small number of followers. And for those of you on the call, my Twitter account, RobertPopeW, I'm more than happy to follow you. It's a good way of getting started and getting some more members onto your account. All of the links and stuff will be at the end of the webcast, as I said earlier. So, as I said, the key thing really is also to promote. So be topic-centric, but also try and push people to an environment where you've got more control over them, if that makes sense. So try to get them onto your website. Make sure that when you're driving people to your website, you have information there that's relevant to them. And I guess, like any conversation, be mindful of what other people are saying in it. You know, understand and read their comments. Don't just blindly post and say, yeah, come to our website, come to our website, come to our website. You have to be able to continue that conversation just as you would do in kind of the normal day-to-day world.